It's time to talk about the important issues for the natural state, and there's only one place to turn for that. Opportunity Arkansas's Nic Horton. You can find Nic's work at opportunityarkansas.org.
And welcome back to the Wild Wednesday edition of First News. And yes, now joining us to talk about some of the big issues here in our state and some of the big stories is the CEO and founder of Opportunity Arkansas, Nic Horton. And Nic, welcome back to the show. How are you this morning? I know I kept you up late watching that debate last night, didn't I?
You did, but I owe you an apology, Toby, and I'm going to do it here publicly in front of the whole
I love
state
this.
of Arkansas.
Let me sit back. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I gave you a hard time about making me watch that debate, like I normally do, but I have to say, that may be the best presidential, vice presidential debate I've ever seen.
Wow.
And I'm not exaggerating. Like, I really think, I think back to 2012, Paul Ryan against Joe Biden. That was probably, the high water mark previously. But I really thought, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but I really thought it was pretty well done, and it was a real contrast. The candidates talked about actual issues.
Yeah,
I thought it was great.
Yeah, no, you really could tell the difference in the two parties and the difference in what they're talking about policy-wise. And I think that's a good thing because, one is definitely more sustainable than the other. And talking about the GOP side being a lot more sustainable for our country than what the left is trying to do. But then just the fact that you weren't waiting for the gotcha, between each other. They really were on the issues of protecting their candidate, protecting Harris and protecting Trump on each side. And then just J.D. Vance is so well-spoken. It's such a good debater that he just, able to keep his cool through the whole thing and really project his message very well. And so I agree with you. It was it was refreshing to watch compared to what we've seen on the other side. I'm not trying to say that the presidential debates are a joke or anything, but it seemed like we all garnered a lot more information out of this last night.
Yeah, I'll say it. They've been pretty bad, this last couple cycles. But yeah, I have plenty of complaints about last night. I thought the moderators were pretty awful. It was something like half an hour before they asked about the economy, which is far and away the number one issue. Far and away. And they wanted to talk about climate change and all of these other pet issues that the media obsesses over. They clearly, they had some sort of agreement, and J.D. Vance finally called them out on this at one point. But there was an agreement that they were not supposed to fact check the candidates.
Right.
And they did it constantly. I was screaming at my TV because they just continued to, technically, and they had an actual agreement in advance that they were not supposed to do that. I also thought the format, I missed the days of live audiences. I don't know if COVID did away with that or if it's the Trump effect of, they don't want people to cheer too much. But that really bothers me. I miss the days of having a live audience in this very sterile format, where it feels like you're just watching a play or watching some sort of performance. It's very, very strange to me. We used to have at least one presidential debate, and not the vice presidential, because the vice presidential, they're usually sitting at a table, as I recall, and it's very much a conversation, which I've always enjoyed that format too. But there used to be at least one presidential debate with a live audience where the candidates would sit on a stool, and they would actually get up and kind of wander around like a town hall style and take questions from the audience, and that was, to me, those were the best debates, and I've watched dozens of these. I miss that more natural, human feeling format. I think these have just gotten really sterile. But all that being said, again, I thought it was really, really good. Tim Walz, I think, look, he's decent on the stump. I've seen him out on the stump and at the rallies, and he's actually pretty good and engaging. I thought from a stylistic, obviously substantively, totally disagree with just about everything he said.
Right.
But stylistically, just to be objective, he was really bad in this format. He was scattered. He misspoke a lot.
Yeah.
He seemed very nervous. At one point, he said, he knows about school shootings because he's befriended a lot of school shooters.
Yeah.
And look, people misspeak, right? So I'm not going to beat him up on that. But he just kind of felt all over the place. And even 45 minutes into the debate, he still felt like very fidgety and just like he didn't know what he wanted to say when.
Yeah.
And the contrast with J.D. Vance, who was just unbelievably comfortable and on message and talked in a way that, everyday Americans who don't watch this stuff or pay attention to this stuff every day like you and I do, they could understand what he was talking about. I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah, no, it definitely came off a lot better than some of the past debates, that's for sure. We're talking with Nic Horton this morning. He's the CEO and founder of Opportunity Arkansas. Nick, I wanted to get into some of the ballot initiatives this morning because this week the Secretary of State's office took another ballot initiative off the ballot with medical marijuana access coming off due to not having enough valid signatures. And so I have a few questions to pose to you, and maybe you'll have some insight for us here. But what is so confusing with our signature gathering rules in Arkansas that these groups can't get it done correctly? That it doesn't seem like it should be that hard to get these signatures. And so that's my first question: is there a problem with how we have to have people collecting signatures for ballot initiatives? In your mind, is the protocol not how it should be, and especially compared to other states?
Oh yeah, great question. Look, I think the process is really clear. I mean, you can Google in about 30 seconds, you can find the Secretary of State's handbook.
Yeah.
And it lists just step by step the rules. And a lot of these folks, particularly the medical marijuana folks, the casino folks, I mean, they go out. There's vendors, Toby, in other states, in Florida and California and places that come in and run these campaigns for them, and they pay them lots and lots of money to come in and train volunteers and get the petitions put together and do all of this. So these are paid professionals. They've got high-powered attorneys. They've got consultants. It's not that complicated.
Yeah.
And then you've got get these really sophisticated groups that are helping put these campaigns together. I think the issue is not with the rules, or I should say a lack of clarity about the rules. I think there's some systemic problems with the process. And so we have, for example, this cure period. We're one of 2 states in the country that has a cure period. And what that means is there's an initial deadline for the signatures, but if you meet a certain threshold of valid signatures after that threshold, you get an extension. You get 30 days. You get an extra, it's like you get an extra month to turn in your book report in grade school. Well, that creates an incentive for these groups to go out and just get as many signatures as they can. And it doesn't matter necessarily to them whether they're valid signatures, whether they're actually registered voters, whether they actually live in the state of Arkansas. And we have laws on the books that say they can't intentionally submit fraudulent signatures, but they have incentive to just not ask and just not do their homework and make sure that they're actually signing up valid, signatures and valid voters. And so they run up the score. And in the case of this marijuana amendment, what did they do? The threshold was a little under 91,000.
Yeah.
They submitted over 111,000 signatures. And after those signatures were counted, they had thrown out, the Secretary of State had to throw out like 40 or 50,000 signatures. So they had a less than 60% accuracy rate overall, including the cure period. And the result of that is massive amounts of taxpayer-funded hours of Secretary of State employees, and by the way, not just employees, but the Secretary of State's office has to go out and hire additional contract help that taxpayers pay for, by the way, to validate all of these signatures. They have to do it for the for the initial deadline, which they threw out tens of thousands of signatures for.
Right.
And then they have to do it again for the cure period deadline, which they again threw out tens of thousands of signatures for. So I think the problem is not the lack of clarity, or the left wants to say, all these people want to say, oh, well, we didn't know what the rules were. It's so confusing. That's not the issue. The issue is just the incentives and the system itself. And I think we need some major reform here.
Yeah, well, it kind of sounds like it. And so, because, I mean, you want people to me, if you look at the big ball of wax here, it's a situation where all of a sudden everything's getting thrown out at the Secretary of State's office, so therefore the public doesn't vote on things. And so, and obviously, there's initiatives that, some of us, probably everybody listening to this radio station was against, like the abortion initiative that came up. But, the Supreme Court says, this is a thing of the states, and so we should vote on these things. Potentially. I mean, I agree with you that, as long as we're in a free country, there's going to be a lot of people bringing, a lot of special interest groups bringing up a lot of ballot issues that are going to be completely bunk. But it seems like you want to get at least some of these to the vote, and it seems like we're throwing more out than we're keeping in here in Arkansas. And that was my second question, was how much of a draw is this on our tax dollars to try and qualify all these different ballot amendments? And it sounds like it's substantial from what you were saying.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant drain. I mean, I think we'll be at Opportunity Arkansas. We're going to be doing some more work on this and writing some more about this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe potentially could even get, hopefully, some cost figures from the state and Secretary of State to figure out exactly how much this costs Arkansans.
Mm-hmm.
But it's certainly a drain, and it's also a drain on the efficiency of the Secretary of State's office and other parts of state government that, the Attorney General's office and all these other places where instead of doing their regular duties and making sure that state government is running well, they have to spend money. I mean, you think about this. The initial signature deadline for these ballot amendments was July 5th.
Right.
That was 3 months ago. And, we're still dealing with this nonsense. And honestly, now this is going to court, and that's going to court, and this is going to be appealed, and it's a huge drain. And frankly, it's just a waste of time and resources. I think the other part of this, too, is we have to acknowledge, and some people are going to have to take their medicine on this, that a lot of these ideas, like the abortion amendment, we go back to the education rights amendment that we've talked about a lot on this show. Voters don't want those things.
Right.
But voters don't want them. And so one of the reasons why these gatherers, petition gatherers, have all these signatures thrown out and such an incentive to run up the score with invalid signatures is because they're having a hard time, I think, in some of these cases, finding voters that want to sign those petitions. There's petition fatigue and all of that,
yeah.
But there's also just a lack of support for their ideas, and that gets overlooked. They love the blame game on this, right? Like they love to say, oh, well, Secretary of State's office, I mean, they really screwed us on this. We didn't know the rules. They hid the football. Huge problem. It's all their fault. But at some point, they've got to realize the rules are very clear, and they may have to look in the mirror a little bit on this and realize, number one, they haven't followed the rules in a lot of these cases, but also Arkansans don't want what they're selling, and that's just the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think that's something that these special interest groups, really have to look at is that, are we running something up in this state that just has no legs and wasting people's time with it? Because I mean, frankly, Nick, we see like hiring fairs, job fairs going on now that have more boosts for ballot initiative signings than there are companies at the job fair that are hiring, and so that's they're having to put on these special events to try and get mass groups of people. And that, I think that speaks volumes as well about what the initiative is just in general, that's how you have to go about it to get signatures. But looking forward to seeing what you find out at Opportunity Arkansas as you dig into this, especially the financial side, what this cost is like to taxpayers. But of course, you can always see Nick's work at opportunityarkansas.org. That is the website. And Nick, always appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you again next week. So thanks for stopping by this morning, and appreciate you staying up late last night for us.
Hey, anything for you, Toby. Anytime.
Jay, clip that also. That should be in a promo also. All right, Nick. Have a good week, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, brother.